Will you pray with me? May the words of my lips and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Let me just bring us up to date with this brilliant story in Genesis. Joseph is Rachel's firstborn son, and Rachel was Jacob's favourite wife. If you remember, he worked for Laban for 7 years to gain Rachel's hand, only to be tricked into marrying her sister Leah, and then worked a further 7 years for Rachel. It was true love. Unfortunately, it took many, many years before Rachel conceived, and so Joseph was almost the youngest of the 12 sons. There was one younger, which was Rachel's other son, and Joseph's younger brother, Benjamin. Now, the older boys lost favour with Jacob, who, you will remember also, was named Israel after wrestling with the angel. Israel means the one who has struggled with God. Then Joseph is given a garment in Genesis 37, verse 3. Now, this garment is mentioned over and over again. You might have noticed if you heard the story read last week. Honestly, I got sick of reading the word robe by the time I got to the end of the reading. It is as if the author is pointing to the garment over and over, jumping up and down. It's important, this garment. Perhaps it feels like we're meant to be scandalised by it. But why? Let's dig a little deeper. The Hebrew word for it is ketanet pasim. Many study Bibles have a footnote against this phrase saying the meaning of this word is unclear. And indeed, the phrase doesn't appear outside the biblical literature. In other words, other ancient Hebrew texts don't have this word within it. And in fact, the Bible only has this phrase on one other occasion, and that is in 2 Samuel 13, verses 18 to 19, a story of King David's daughter, Tamar. It's a horrible story of rape by her brother Amnon. But in the narrative, it gives us a definition of the phrase ketanet pasim. So after the rape, Amnon has his servant put Tamar out and has the door bolted after her. And the text says that she was wearing a ketanet pasim, for this was the kind of garment that the virgin daughters of the king wore. Tamar put ashes on her head and tore the ketanet pasim she was wearing. She put her hands on her head and went away weeping aloud as she went. So this was a garment that the virgin daughters of the king wore. In other words, a princess dress. Now, for me, if this is true, if this is the meaning of the word that we heard before, it puts into context the sort of visceral reaction of the brothers towards Joseph. I mean, yes, Joseph was arrogant and he had these dreams where his brothers bowed down to him. Very, very annoying. And also, Joseph was Jacob's favourite child, also very annoying. But it seems odd, obviously, how many times the text mentions this garment. It's obviously important. So I wonder, it seems likely that Jacob had given Joseph a female garment. Now, we know Jacob himself did not conform to gender stereotypes because he spent time around the tents with the women cooking. So he is perhaps sympathetic to his son Joseph. But when the brothers saw Joseph out and about on that awful day, and he was wearing that garment, they seem oddly violent. There's something about their behaviour that seems punitive. They do violence against Joseph and the garment. And honestly, if it was such a great robe, if they were jealous of this amazing robe, then why did they not simply cast lots for who would now be the owner of it? And this violence, I wonder whether it also mirrors the violence today and the huge uncomfortableness that exists against transgender people. Now, Joseph is shipped off to Egypt and he gets on quite well. He's described as a beautiful man, and so much so that his master's wife wants to seduce him. And when he refuses, she accuses him of rape and he is imprisoned. And in jail, Joseph gets on well again and he's put in charge of the other prisoners. He interprets dreams, including one for the cupbearer for Pharaoh, who then leaves prison and is restored to the Pharaoh's household. Later on, when Pharaoh is troubled by dreams himself, the cupbearer remembers Joseph. And so Joseph is brought before Pharaoh and he interprets Pharaoh's dreams. He says that they mean there will be 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine. Pharaoh is obviously impressed and appoints him as his second in command. And they have the 7 years of plenty, but then in the second year of the famine, Joseph's brothers, without Benjamin, are sent by Jacob to Egypt to buy grain. Obviously, nowhere else has got grain at the time other than Egypt. Joseph recognizes his brothers, but they don't recognize him. And Joseph hears of this younger brother at home with his father and demands that Benjamin is brought. So Simeon is imprisoned until they have gone home to collect him and return. They do return, this time with Benjamin, and buy more grain. But on leaving, Joseph tests them. He hides a silver cup in Benjamin's sack, and the brothers are stopped and told of the missing silver cup, and told that whoever has it must become Joseph's slave. When it is found in Benjamin's sack, Judah pleads that Benjamin must return home. His father's heart was already broken by Joseph's death. He could not bear to lose Rachel's other son, Benjamin. It would kill his father. It is at this point that we meet the story in today's lectionary. Now Joseph could no longer control himself, and he sent everyone away and revealed himself to his brothers. And they are terrified of reprisal, but Joseph forgives them. He says that it was God that sent Joseph to Egypt in order to save lives. Now, this is the second story of forgiveness and reconciliation that we've heard. Esau forgave Jacob. Now Joseph forgives his brothers. But in both cases, those that were forgiven didn't entirely believe it. Jacob thought Esau would kill him, and it affected their relationship from that point onwards. And the brothers feared that Joseph would seek retribution at some point. They were particularly afraid after Jacob died that Joseph would kill them then. And at that point, when Jacob does die, in Genesis chapter 50, verse 20, Joseph once again reassures his brothers with these words: "Even though you intended to do harm to me, God intended it for good, in order to preserve numerous people as he is doing today." It is complicated, isn't it? Even when other people forgive us, can we forgive ourselves? And can we really trust them not to hold it against us? I guess in the case of Joseph, the sin is so great the grief that they put their father through, and all the years of slavery that they put Joseph through. Of course, Joseph remained a slave, and as did the whole family ultimately, which was okay while this Pharaoh was alive. But then when the next Pharaoh came along, he oppressed them terribly. But let's not go too far forward in the story. My question for us today is whether we can forgive others, and in particular, whether we can have the faith to believe that the harm that others do to us can be turned around and used for good. Perhaps even more challenging is to wonder whether we can allow ourselves to be forgiven and pray that the harm that we have done to others might be used for good. I hope that doesn't sound trite. I don't mean it to be. I have been very broken by others on many occasions, and forgiveness is a word that needs to be used with care. But I wonder whether forgiveness is the single thing that gives us most hope for redemption in life. As a teenager at my lowest ebb, I discovered Christianity and the Bible. I read the New Testament for the first time using my school Bible, starting at Matthew and working forwards. I read every single verse, and then I found a single verse that astonished me. It was in Romans, and it echoes the words of Joseph. Romans 8:28. And we know that all things work together for the good of those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. All things? Can God work all things together for good, for the good of those who love God? Really? All things? All things. Even my past, even COVID, even prejudice against trans people, even brothers who hate me and dump me in a pit and sell me into slavery. All things. Can God use all things for good? Please, God, let it be so. Amen.